Okay guys, quick question. Why aren't you playing Titanfall 2 already? Oh yeah, I forgot. The game release was pushed between Battlefield 1 and Infinite Warfare, so I guess you're excused, but what about the game's publisher, EA? Fans of the series seem to be overjoyed. The game has great reviews, yet it had a lackluster marketing campaign and seems to be forgotten amongst other AAA releases of the season. Why was the game so unlucky? Was it doomed from the start? Titanfall 2 will probably go down in history as 2016's most depressing release. The game's developer, Respawn Entertainment, listened in to what the fans wanted and made a bigger game with focus on multiplayer, but this time around with a short yet satisfying campaign in the package. EA, however, decided to release the game just after their biggest launch of the year, Battlefield 1, but before their rivals hit, Infinite Warfare. And while the latest Call of Duty games don't seem to gather the big audience they used to back in the day, it's still an opponent that is not to be taken lightly. Was releasing Titanfall in such a time a demonstration of brute strength, or rather, a simple act of stupidity? Since the announcement, industry's analysis claimed that such a move was naive, and the gaming community seemed to have the same opinion. The hype for the World War I set Battlefield was enormous, and if that wasn't Titanfall's problem, the Call of Duty franchise, despite questionable quality, still is a household name. We still don't have any sales info, but few price drops and a small interest from the community seem to speak for themselves. The game isn't selling as good as it should. Before we continue forward, a short history lesson. It is not the first time Vince Zampella, the man behind Respawn, was about to be screwed over by a big publisher. That's not the first time Zampella is working with EA either. Remember Medal of Honor Allied Assault? Yeah, that one of the best in its series and probably one of the best World War II shooters. That was also a game by Zampella and some of his people. After the success of Allied Assault, Zampella started Infinity Ward, which later did Call of Duty. However, the conception of the title is a matter of some, at the time, unfortunate events. At first, Infinity Ward was supposed to make Medal of Honor 2, but EA later decided that the franchise was too important for them and too important to give to an outside developer. And so Zampella was faced with a difficult choice. Either go work with EA again, but have many restrictions, or have more creative freedom and look for support elsewhere, and with a new franchise. Soon after, Infinity started working with Activision, and the rest is history, while Call of Duty remains Battlefield's greatest rival. There is some poetic justice and, well, irony that now Call of Duty is still, to put it lightly, popular, while Medal of Honor has been dead for a couple of years now. It's not like I'm trying to make you like Titanfall 2 by force, because I think the game is not appreciated as it should be, but that's not the first time and it won't be the last time a publisher put a developer at a disadvantage. I'm talking here about a forgettable marketing campaign or no idea whatsoever about how to help a game achieve success. And well, look at that. Here comes EA again. The company started out as a publisher, but after time expanded and acquired some of its own studios, while still having a so-called EA Partners program, which just so happens to include Titanfall 2 and titles like Crysis, Brutal Legend, or the now forgotten Fuse from Insomniac. Overall, however, games from EA Partners program rarely achieve the success of the titles that come straight from EA, because the company doesn't pay them as much attention. However, a bad marketing campaign or not, simply not caring for your game is not restricted to outside titles. We all remember how Konami cancelled PT after the little drama with Kojima. Despite many fan theories, outstandingly positive reactions, and the most clever game reveal in history, the company still cancelled the long-awaited Silent Hill sequel because, I assume, they wanted to have nothing to do with the name of Kojima. Even if a game is released though, a lack of support and bland trailers can still kill it, which was the case with Champions of Antaria from Blue Byte, the developers of the legendary Settlers series. More often than not, games are doomed before the release, when season passes and plans for the title are laid out. Sure, Battlefield or Battlefront can have a second half of the game release in the form of DLC, but such greed can kill the game if the brand isn't strong enough. That was the case with Evolve, which after a while went to a free-to-play model and just recently had the developers' support cut. To be quite honest with you guys, it's kinda sad to see a good game or a potentially great game never achieve the success it deserves and get the appreciation it needs. So if that's the case, can a publisher get away with that? And do developers agree to those terms willingly? Well, in both cases, the answer is yes. Looking for a business partner, most developers want a bigger budget, a marketing campaign, and someone who will take care of the sales. In return, the publisher gets a lot of control over the final product. Various horror stories that circulate around the web tell us how a publisher can take over a franchise, how it can influence and hinder creativity, or even pay or don't pay off things such as bonuses when a game gets certain reviews. That's why Obsidian didn't get some of the money they were promised for New Vegas because of a few % less on Metacritic. After their previous troubles with the publisher, it seems, that would be the case for Respawn's franchise. When the first Titan-themed shooter was released, Respawn was working with Microsoft, and developers themselves were the last ones that learned that the game will only come out for Xbox One and PC. Sure, Microsoft put a lot of time and effort into marketing the first Titanfall, but without a doubt, the debut of the franchise would have been much more successful if it also included the PS4, which at the time was the go-to next-gen platform. When it comes to the sequel, Zampella at first had it easy with EA and knew pretty much when the game would be released. However, as he claims, if it was up to him, he wouldn't release it on that day, because he's not an idiot. The developer seems to be disappointed, and rightfully so, and in another interview, Zampella was asked about Titanfall 3 and looked towards to his companion from EA's marketing in response, probably not knowing what he was allowed to say. After EA's short response that the company supports Titanfall, he said, whatever the fuck that means. So here a question arises, are publishers that evil? Well, if we take a step back and look at it from their perspective, it's not so black and white anymore. Video games are a business of high risk, and sometimes the developers can't allow more spotlight even for a game that deserves it if it's not profitable enough. In the battle for supremacy this fall season, EA bet all of its money on Battlefield 1, and rightfully so. In that case, Titanfall 2 was not the trump card we wanted it to be, but more of a necessary pawn sacrifice in a chess game to weaken Call of Duty in the eyes of those who wanted a futuristic shooter, but were disinterested in Battlefield from the start because of the setting. The publishers often need to make difficult choices, and some on this battlefield, no pun intended, need to suffer from time to time, if others are to make the final push to the finish line. A certain forum user once said that Ubisoft bet so much money on Assassin's Creed, of which we got tired at some point, because that's the franchise that pays the bills and keeps the proverbial boat afloat. And I can stomach even a dozen more uninspired Assassin's Creed games if that means Ubi can release indie games such as Valiant Hearts and Child of Light, experiment with new genres like in Steep, or even try a new blockbuster franchise like For Honor every once in a while. As stated before, a publisher needs to play their hands smart and make a sacrifice from time to time, because if a publisher fails, the body count increases, and it's not the big titles that are the only ones to suffer. Remember what happened to THQ? When the company went under, the fate of many games became uncertain, and while Stick of Truth got lucky thanks to Ubisoft, some franchises that belong to THQ still haven't seen a major release to this day. So in conclusion, what can we gamers do in such a hostile and depressing environment? Well, first of all, we need to accept the fact that that's the current state of the industry, and we need to accept that that's just the way it is. Secondly, I think we need to stop demonizing the publishers that, sure, at times might seem completely evil, but after all, it's not their fault. In the end, it is us gamers who make the decisions and us who vote. So if you think a game is doing poorly and is underappreciated, buy it, recommend it to a friend, or even make a YouTube video about it, just like I'm doing right now. Thanks for watching, guys, stay positive, and see you around.